Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Strong Towns webcast. We have a very special webcast for all of you today. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists for Introduction to Cultivating Strong Towns. These are the folks from Cultivate Collaborative who are putting on a really exciting new workshop. The first one is taking place in Frisco, Texas. Is it November 7th? 4th. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting my numbers. November 4th. There's still time to register if you are a Texas area native or you're willing to travel. But they wanted to give you all a preview of it now because they are launching this workshop series nationwide and wanted to bring some fantastic tools to all of your communities to apply Strong Towns principles in your areas. So I'm just going to go left to right on my screen and introduce first Kevin Shepard.
Hello, guys.
Okay. All right, we've got Amanda Popkin.
Hi.
Matt Lewis.
Hello.
And we just lost Jordan Clark. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right. There's our magic trick for the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the panelists, but I wanted to say off the bat that we are going to end this session with a Q&A. You are welcome to go ahead and start putting your Q&A questions right in the chat in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can ask those throughout the webcast, and at the end, we will make some time to answer them. You can also feel free to chat with one another if you'd like to zoom your ideas around, and the panelists might have a couple of things for you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the Cultivate Collaborative team. Welcome to Introduction to Cultivating Strong Towns.
Thanks, Kia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Everybody see that? We good, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna, since you've already seen our faces and so you can put some faces with voices at least, we're gonna turn our webcams off while we go through this, and then we'll turn them back. We'll turn them back on when we get to Q&A at the end. So there we go. Okay, so just to get started, my name's Kevin Shepard. I'm a co-founder of Verdunity. I've been, you guys have heard me on the Strong Towns podcast before, but I'm a long-time Strong Towns follower, civil engineer turned placemaker planner. Spent the first 15 years of my career doing typical planning work. Got into a national director role of my former firm's community planning group, where I kind of my eyes were open to placemaking, urban planning, and really fiscal sustainability. And that's where I first met Chuck back in 2010, back in the early days, and then started Verdunity in 2011 to focus on fiscally responsible engineering and planning work. And then here just recently, just talking about ways we can improve how we're serving our communities. Matt and Amanda and Jordan and I were all working together and decided that we wanted to. We felt like we could make a bigger impact, and by pooling our thoughts and our ideas together. I don't know if guys, you want to take a real quick minute just to go through and introduce, tell everybody a little more about each of you first before we dig in.
Sure, I can go real quick. Matt Lewis. I have been a public planner, being a director of development services for the fastest growing cities in the nation for the last 12, 13 years. And so started in Hutto, Texas in 2004, became the director of planning development services there, moved to San Marcos, Texas, and then to Austin, Texas before starting Simple City Design, where I wanted to help multiple cities at one time build better places, and again, focused on fiscal responsibility and integrating communities back together, zipping up the zipper of our streets and redefining the way that the public and private realms work. So excited to be here and part of the Cultivate Collaborative, and I think you'll be real excited about what we're bringing to various communities. Thanks.
I'll go next. I'm Amanda Popkin. I've got a master's in city planning, but I started my career doing economic development through the DFW Chamber and City of Dallas, and just began doing these kinds of, grassroots activation projects on my own in my own community, and then at City Hall where I was working, and just started meeting folks in the placemaking community here in Dallas. And soon enough, we were launching our own firm, Ash and Lime Strategies, I've worked for a developer and in the private sector, and now I'm doing placemaking full time. And really, my heart is in sustainability and making cities better places, ecologically, socially, and economically, because that's what's really important. So in my mind, placemaking is the way that we begin that, by these grassroots activations. So I'll talk to you guys about the placemaking aspect of things.
So, so what we saw in our work individually and then here recently together is that there's a growing number of people that are getting on board with the Strong Towns movement, that want to incorporate and implement Strong Towns ideas in their communities, but you're hitting snags along the way. Matt and Amanda and Jordan and myself, we're hitting some of those same snags. We were making some progress with some of the projects that we were doing, but felt like we had an opportunity, like I said, to do things a little bit better by teaming up. So we formed this Cultivate collaborative. We're still working out the details of what the organization is going to look like, but the idea is to bring people and perspectives together to kind of get over some of these hurdles and build stronger, better places. Let me see. So what we like to start off with is asking you guys the question of what's when it comes, a lot of you guys are trying to incorporate Strong Towns principles into your communities, and we had the survey that went out before the webinar here, and we're continuing to run that. We've been running it for about a month now, but I'd like to ask the question of what's the biggest challenge or frustration that you guys are up against as you're trying to incorporate Strong Towns into the work that you're doing. So take a second over in the chat box, maybe enter Not seeing any over there yet. Well, so we have about half of the folks that have taken our survey so far are on what we'll call the city side. So you're a city leader, city manager, finance officer, elected official. You want to do these things. You want to make your city a more financially resilient, people-friendly place, but you feel like you're spinning your wheels a little bit. You're so busy in the day-to-day activities of whatever your role is there that it's tough to find the time to shake loose of just doing the same thing and trying to incorporate some of these different ideas. At the same time, the other half of the folks that we're hearing from are on the citizen side, what we're calling implementers. So you could be a concerned citizen, maybe you're a small developer, entrepreneur, local business, and maybe you want to contribute, but you don't really know how to contribute yet. Or you're trying to do those things. You're trying to get a small development project through. You're trying to make your neighborhood better, and you're just, like we said, hitting those walls, hitting those snags, whether it's a zoning code or a process, somebody that's not really here in your city that's just not totally on board with these new approaches yet. So how do we, we were finding that too in the work that we were doing on the private side and trying to figure out how do we move forward? And the reason that so many people in so many places are having these feelings is like we've talked about so many times with Strong Towns, it's business as usual is broken. The way that we're building our places, planning them, building them, operating them, it's disconnected, it's inefficient, and ultimately it's unsustainable, whether that's fiscally, environmentally, or socially. So all of us, Matt and I both have kids, but we had a kind of what we call the lock-in a few weeks ago where we got together and just brainstorm ideas for this. And what came out of that session with our group was just this shared passion for, we have to make our communities and our neighborhoods and really our world a better place soon, and we can't kind of keep fiddling around. So so with the collaborative, we've pulled some things together from different places. We've kind of consolidated those into a cohesive, integrated approach. And what we're going to talk about today is 5 main areas that we're encouraging communities to look into. In our workshops, in the consulting work that we're doing, we dig into these deeper, but we thought it would be helpful just to kind of give a quick overview of what these 5 main ones are, and then maybe the second half of this, we can get into some discussion with you guys about more specifics of in each of these areas and some ideas and case studies for what we're doing. The first of these, and this is a big one, is land use and growth management. As most people that follow strong towns are aware of, Chuck calls it the suburban experiment. But this idea of we have a lot of growth over a short amount of time. The development comes in mostly the developer funded, where they're building the new subdivisions, the new neighborhoods, the new businesses. Most of it's at the cost of a developer. If the city is putting money in, it's typically for quality of life amenities like a sports complex or parks, things of that nature that help promote it as the best place to live, live, work, play. We see a lot of the suburban communities around the country that are like that. But where it starts to get exposed is when the growth slows down. And if you look at the right side of this chart, where your growth slows down and that revenue from the new growth isn't coming in anymore, at the same time, that's when all the service costs and the maintenance for all the stuff that was built over that 10 or 15 or 20-year rapid growth period, all of that stuff, the streets, the utilities, the schools, the houses, the buildings, all of it has to be maintained at the same time. And that's where you see this shift of the neighborhoods, the infrastructure start to decline, the wealth moves out, the people that are able to move to a new community, and it just kind of amplifies the decline where the revenues continue to go down, but the service needs and the maintenance continues to go up. And that's where we're starting to see communities across the country that are entering this stage. And what's scary to me is that there's so many more that are just so close, but we still have an opportunity to shift that thinking.
Kevin, can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
The other thing that I've noticed in working with fast-growing cities is fast-growing cities are getting this type of development pattern really quickly because the development community is running a math exercise. And the math exercise says the lowest common denominator building will actually work in communities that have ordinances and codes that allow it. And the outputs look very similar to the photos here. What's not being communicated, though, is the financial aspects, the interconnectedness of our communities. Those types of things are secondary and tertiary effects that our communities don't realize yet. And what we need to do as professionals is to be able to communicate this message on the front end to the city managers, the fire chiefs, the finance directors, public works directors, to let them know that there's a better way. And that's the way that we'll be framing this moving forward.
Thanks, Matt. So the shift in this, the approach that we're encouraging is more of an incremental approach. So it's growing steadily. Instead of having that growth happen over a short amount of time, it's growing steadily over a longer amount of time. But most importantly, it's looking at your revenues and looking at your services and aligning those so that you're not extending yourself as a community too far in the future. And then you're building places in a way that can flex and evolve and incrementally add in value. And then, at the right side of this chart, you see at some point you hit a place where your population kind of stabilizes or continues to steadily grow a little bit, but your revenue takes off because you're building the multi-story, the more dense stuff, the things that Joe Minicozy and Urban 3, the high value development, where you have the 20, 30, 40 to 1, or higher returns, and then your service costs are still manageable. And there are ways to manage this with your land use, with your zoning, and your infrastructure to get this stuff right, which we'll talk about here in some of these next slides. So the second area that we focus on is citizen engagement, and for us, this is a really critical part of our approach, maybe the most critical approach. And when we say citizen engagement, it's not just about how do you ask the citizens 2 or 3 times a year as part of a planning project, you have a public meeting or whatever to give input, on something. But it's coming at it from the approach or the philosophy that everybody in your community has this want, this need, and really an ability to contribute. So everybody's got they've got time. We call it the three T's. They got time, talent, or treasure that they can contribute into their community, but they just need help knowing how to do it, knowing where to do it, and most importantly, just feeling that their contribution is going to be appreciated in return from the city and others in their community. An example of this that was going around recently was an Eagle Scout. I forget the city that was in, but it was an Eagle Scout, and for his project, there was a road corridor that had a really bad traffic congestion. And for his project, he went out, he studied it, he did traffic counts, he got some of his friends to help do some research. And ultimately, he recommended a road diet where they dropped a lane in each direction. They went out, did a tactical demonstration project. It reduced the congestion, things flowed better, and that's now going forward to where the city's actually making the infrastructure improvements to make that project project permanent. So it's an example of something that was done at no cost to the city, other than them giving him the ability to go do that project, and is now resulting in an improvement that resolves an issue that the neighbors had brought to the attention of the city. So, Amanda, you want to expand on this one?
Yeah, not only do we want to provide the kind of engagement opportunities that allow people with different schedules to be a part of the process and interact. There's a lot of folks who work nights or work two jobs, or we want to do the kinds of things that don't just bring people to City Hall, but engage them in creative ways where we attract different demographics in the town and different people with various ideas, because the cities are made out of all of us. So we want to be inclusive and reach out to people in really creative ways. Matt has a great example of one thing that they did. Matt, why don't you tell that story?
Sure. Citizen engagement, most states have state law requirements for public hearings when you're making modifications to policies. And those are the bare minimums. You post your public hearing and let everyone get their 3 minutes in the microphone, and the last person standing, wins the vote. In Austin, Texas, we were writing the land development code, Code Next, and we couldn't get people to show up to the event. And so we thought about, what's an Austin thing to do? What do we do in Austin? Well, we like roller girls, we like bands, we like barbecue, we like buskers, and we threw a big party called Soundcheck. And basically, we invited 5 bands to come out. We had a series of food trucks, and we threw a big festival, essentially. And the festival was a celebratory event celebrating the fact that we're actually rewriting the entire land development code. And these types of events need to be celebrations in communities. They need to draw people together of different socioeconomic diversities and geographic differences to actually think through how the network of systems works. But it was a really fun way of integrating the community. We had over 565 people show up to the event to see their favorite bands. It was a fun way to get to know neighbors and to introduce city leaders in a not off the dais type of setting. So citizen engagement is really a critical piece, and that process element is sometimes equitable or more important than the outcome of the code. One, by relationship building, but two, by truly engaging the public in a meaningful and purposeful way. So you're not wasting time and you're not just checking boxes, and that's kind of the approach we like to take.
That's essentially what we try to do when we're doing placemaking projects, is not only bring people together to talk about what they want and what they want to see in their city, but then also talk to individual business owners and property owners and help them see how their role in the downtown or neighborhood or district can influence where how things change and where the neighborhood goes. A lot of times our placemaking activities are practice for everyday life, and just to help them see personally how to plug in and how they can be more creative and create more relationships with their neighbors and friends to change things in the direction they want to see. We also try to include student interns. I think this is a really important part of the placemaking engagement that we do, when we're not only teaching kids how to be leaders helping them become more leaders than they already are by introducing them to other city leaders and getting them more embedded into town leadership roles, but also teaching them that the things that they're seeing happen in their community, the anecdotal situations that they're seeing are related to demographic trends and the data, and really be able to walk through that with them helps them feel like they're a part of the community, they're a part of the change. They can see, validating their hunches about what needs to be done is a really important part. And then also I like to just talk about, there's 3 important people groups that we need to have included: city staff, elected officials, and community groups. When you've got all 3 of those together working towards the same goal, it's incredible.
Oops. Awesome. So, so the next one, where the place where your citizens are spending the majority of their time is in their neighborhood, right? There was an IBM study a few years ago that showed if a city focuses on improving quality of life in their neighborhoods, in the local neighborhoods, down at the local kind of street block scale, that property values and ultimately the city's overall revenues will go up, and the turnover of people and businesses that are moving in and out of a community goes down. So getting your neighborhoods, getting your infrastructure right is a key component, both to stabilizing and increasing your property values, but also to that idea of retaining your businesses and residents over time, as whether it's as they age or as they move in. Jordan, I think Jordan's going to expand on that one a bit.
Yeah, so we're focused on helping communities create complete neighborhoods, which essentially means that the majority of anybody's daily needs can be met within a 15-minute walk, as opposed to 15-minute drive, which seems to be the standard most places these days. Means access to quality public schools, parks and open space, groceries, other gathering places, and access to reliable public transit for the times when you need to leave your neighborhood. Our focus is also on right sizing your infrastructure, so in a way that accommodates multiple modes of travel, creates, in addition to being functional, serves as an attractive addition to the public realm, and I think probably most importantly, it's able to flex over time as the neighborhood's needs change. I think the third piece of this is to encourage diversity and flexibility of housing and other types of buildings. So on the commercial side, that means more incremental, adaptable commercial development that can take on new uses as the neighborhood evolves. And on the housing side, neighborhoods need a mix of missing middle housing, different types that are compatible with one another, that are also capable of flexing over time with the neighborhood, but that allow people in different stages of life, different income levels, to live in the same areas. Really, all of these 3 things, the buildings, the infrastructure, the public realm, have to work together to create complete and attractive and inclusive neighborhoods that hold their value over time. And well, part of the way we start getting these neighborhoods is by shifting the policies and the codes and the plans that have basically gotten us mediocre neighborhoods to begin with. Matt, I think, is going to address that in a few minutes.
So the next one, and we'll, the math stuff with the plans and codes is coming up here in a sec. The next one, the fourth of the 5 is economic development, and this has become such almost an obsession of communities across the country, and every city is trying to grow its commercial tax base to take pressure off of the residential, the property tax base for those that have that mix. But what the phrase word we like to use is invest in what you've got is the most pure type of economic development, and really the approach that gets the highest ROI for your community. So shifting from instead of giving away valuable dollars in incentives to try to get the franchise or the big box or that big name brand to come to town, just to have them there for a short amount of time, and then the majority of the money leaves your community and goes back to New York or LA or wherever the C-suite is. To shift that to an approach to shift that investment into your public realm, into creating a great place, a unique place where people want to be. And if you do that, and if you invest in the placemaking, invest in identifying, connecting, and growing your local entrepreneurs and your local business community, and then also looking at partnering with schools for local workforce development, you create this magnet that you don't need the incentives to get the businesses to come there just because you've created a great place. It's a magnet, in and unto itself. So Amanda's going to expand on that one and talk a little bit about how she did that in Corsicana.
Absolutely. A lot of what we see, one great example of placemaking is pop-ups. And there's great things that happen with pop-ups. They attract people to the neighborhood. It's a really fun thing and it's interesting, and you get to see cool things that people in your neighborhood are making. And I always like to think of it from the economic development perspective, because, it's a big leap from someone working on a hobby business in the garage to signing a 5 or 10 year lease. And sometimes there's not really anything in between that. So a lot of the cities that I talk to are, how can we standardize this process of allowing people to test out their businesses? And, sometimes that ends up someone signs a lease. As we saw in Garland, we were planning a pop-up project in a burned out building. It's hard to know what to do with those, but, we just brought in the food trucks and the bands, and it was such an amazing afternoon where the downtown realized that there are young families in Garland and that they would come downtown. No one had ever really realized that before. But this brewery had a really great following. They were winning local awards, and they were thinking about signing a lease. And sure enough, after seeing the response that they were getting from their hometown community and working with the developer who happened to own a couple more spaces next door, they were able to find the right fit and sign a lease. That's not always the happy ending story, but like I saw in Corsicana, I had a pop-up shop owner who was ready to sign a lease. She had a successful catering business and had lots of ideas for a niche in the market that no one was filling. Some pre-prepared foods, some really kind of fancier things that folks in Corsicana wanted to take to dinner parties and little things like that. And she had put these together. She created labels on bottles and had really done all of the work to launch a business. And when we started the pop-up program, she said, well, why don't I just do it as a quick pop-up? And rather than just doing it for the weekend, she went ahead and signed, a temporary shake hands agreement lease with the property owner to be there for a good 3 weeks. And in that testing, she realized this is not a good location for my business. For whatever reason, like the flow of the people just wasn't working for her type of business. And she realized that it didn't really work for her business plan. She had a thriving catering business. And if she needed to be in the shop all day long, that was really going to suck a lot of her time and attention away from her main bread and butter. And so what she decided to do was put her things in another shop in town. She met those folks at the pop-up shop as well. They had kind of another business plan they were testing out, and they met each other, got together, and decided she would just rent a room from them instead. So you just never know how these projects come together, but it's so important to provide that in-between opportunity to grow those local entrepreneurs. I wanted to add too, Kevin, that a lot of what we think about economic development is, courting those new headquarters or those new businesses to come. And as everyone who lives in a big city right now is noticing, Amazon is looking for a place to put their new headquarters, and they're not basing it on how much money you're throwing at them. They want their people to live in strong communities with good public transit and great neighborhoods. And they want to be near talent, and local talent, thrives in those kinds of places too. So you will attract the kind of investment that you wish you could throw money at and attract instead. That's all I've got.
Awesome. So the way, and we are watching the Q&A in the chat, and we'll come back and get some of these here in a sec. I think some of these we'll cover as we work through this, but the way that all of this gets wrapped up together is, these are, a lot of this stuff has happened because of our plans, because of our codes, because of our processes. And as I mentioned, earlier, or maybe I didn't, but one of the things that we've heard in the survey so far from the city managers and the staff that are in the trenches. In fact, I just got a response yesterday from someone that works for a city, and they said that they're so busy, they have so many development applications coming through that they just basically look for the bare minimum. They look for the lowest common denominator of and that, well, actually the developers are. They're looking at what's the lowest standard we can do to get it through the process to get our development in and make money. And then the cities are so busy they check the boxes of, yes, it meets this plan, it meets this code, and they're just trying to push volume through, as opposed to being able to slow down and think about the quality and how can they make these projects better. And it was just it was surprising to me how many of the survey responses that we got back that city planners were saying that same thing of they know they could make development A better, but they just don't have time because they've got development B, C, and D coming right behind it. So a key to this whole thing working is getting all of your plans and codes and processes synced up so that, like Amanda said, your elected officials, your staff, your development community, and your citizens are all on the same page with the kind of community that you want, so that it makes it much more efficient and easier, both on the city side and also for the implementer side, to get the right stuff done. And it makes it a lot harder to get the bad stuff done. And what I loved when I first met Matt and started talking to him about his story of 3 different cities, of a small city, a mid-sized, fast-growing city, and then Austin, Texas. In all 3 different places, Matt was able to get alignment of those, and you'll see here with the San Marcos story what that looks like in terms of results. But Matt, maybe take some time here to expand on what this means from the city side of how do you get these things aligned, and then how much that helps in building the kind of environment that we want.
Sure. Being a city planner and being on the municipal side, we have to administer these plans, the codes and the processes. And it's not because we like them or we think they're creating great outcomes, but that's what the policies were guided toward at the time that they were done. And what generally happens is that the plans don't align with the codes. The codes don't align with the neighborhood plans. The neighborhood plans don't align with with the building requirements, and the process doesn't match any of the above. And at the same time, the staff roles aren't aligned with the process. So all of these misalignments have people kind of running in circles and just following the administrative path. What's the easiest thing to administer? Let's not there's no reason to disrupt anything because everything is working in the way that it was kind of not designed, but the way that it was set up. And so going back and looking through the codes, generally what I notice is most development codes are written on the worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that could possibly happen? Code that out. And so your codes are all written with thou shall not do X, thou shall not do this. And the development community is left guessing at what you want, other than the ones where they run the lowest common denominator building. And they say, well, I know that I can build a 20-foot front yard, 5-foot side yards, 30-foot rear yards all day long and do the typical suburban developments. It's going to be administered through the codes and the processes that meets the D- requirements of the development standards, and the process is already set up to administer it. So the development submits a typical subdivision or a typical development pattern because the processes are set up to foster that. And you've got the creative developers out there that want to really push the boundaries, do retrofits or infill development, and the processes and codes don't support that. So my San Marcos example will really lead into this more, but bringing these 3 things together takes effort and it takes time, but it's the most valuable time. And I can't stress enough the sense of urgency that we've got to start repairing our cities. And it starts with these 3 processes. And again, I think it's very important to integrate the staff roles into the process as well, so that everyone knows their own wheelhouse and things start moving efficiently. In San Marcos, one thing we did align these various things. Same thing with Hutto, but we set the base mark in San Marcos. We started studying the baseline data, we were taking about 45 days to get plan sets out the door, just by realigning the process and really analyzing the codes. We went backwards and worked through it, and we were able to reduce the turnaround times from 45 days to 9 days just by streamlining our process and building our staff into the process. And it did not cost any money. We did it internally, just by reviewing our process in a way that development happens, not in the way that it's written in the code book, but what happens right before the C of O. Okay, the final. What happens right before the final? Go all the way back through to the pre-development meeting and see who's administering the various elements of the code, and find out where staff fits in to those processes. And it's a very telling event. So I would highly recommend that exercise.
So, so really what we're trying to contrast here with these five, and we, like I said, we dig into these more in the workshop and get into more of the reasons why, and then also the solutions and case studies to you can implement going forward. But we're trying to contrast that, the business as usual, the status quo. If we keep doing what we're doing, we end up with these fragile local economies. We end up with the service costs that continue to escalate. Maintenance needs that get out of control, and just to the level that we just can't we can't keep up. You get disconnected residents that turns into apathy. In some cases, it turns into frustration. And then, like Matt just talked about, inside of staff, you get people that want to do the right thing, but they're just stuck administrating policies that pump out these generic places that nobody cares about. Versus, if we take this new approach, if we look at these new ideas, we can get to this place that you have a strong self-sustaining economy. You do get service levels aligned with what citizens are willing and able to pay for. Every project that we do, every plan I've done, every engineering project I do, I always start with this of, you can't just have the dream of what does your city want to be when they grow up, or what's the perfect project that we want done. You have to start with, what are your citizens willing and able to pay for, because that's what the city ultimately is able to deliver. So that's a big part of the conversation that has to happen on a lot of this stuff, is resetting expectations with our citizens on what their service levels are going to be going forward, or talking to them about new fees, or I hate to say it, but raising taxes to help pay for some of these things. But the more transparent a city is with these issues and how things get paid for, the faster you can get to having real conversations about how to go forward. The culture of collaboration is a big one too, because like we talked about earlier, cities can't do it all by themselves. You have to tap into the resources of your neighborhood groups, your nonprofits, your local businesses, and make this a collaborative effort. And then all of this gets wrapped up together with your plans, with your strategic plan, your vision, your plans, your codes, and your policies, that everybody it's easier to do the right things, and it's harder to do the things that move us away from the path that we want for our cities. So just real quick, kind of run through a little more about our collaborative and what we're trying to accomplish, and how we can hopefully help some of you guys tackle some of these questions that you're putting in here. And then we'll get straight to the Q&A and discussion. But I spent 15 years, the first 15 years of my career, designing the big fancy infrastructure stuff. My story's a lot like Chuck's, really, where I was doing things I thought were the right thing, and then I kind of had that aha moment that we have to do things differently. And so, there's plenty of options out there for cities if you want the big firm or a typical planning firm that will help you continue to do business as usual. If there's anything you guys take away from this discussion today, it's that this group is absolutely not that. We want to focus on partnering, collaboration, to get these meaningful projects done, to move the needle forward, and most importantly, do it with the resources that you do have, instead of talking about money and other things that communities don't have. Our approach is integrated. We bring together expertise from planning, engineering, policy, finance, placemaking. All of these are together in every project that we're doing, whether it's a roadway design project, a comprehensive plan, or a code update. We're constantly pulling those different pieces together. We're also building on the momentum that Strong Towns and CNU and the Incremental Development Alliance, the Better Block Street Plans guys, all of these things that are starting to bubble up as movements that are gaining some traction and moving things forward. We're trying to take all of those approaches, put them together into a cohesive process, and then give that toolbox to communities and implementers to move forward. A couple examples real quick of projects that this group has done where we're putting these things into practice. Some of you guys that follow Strong Towns might have heard, I think it was last November, about a year ago, last November, December, did a webinar on the Roy City comp plan that we did. It has a ton of these things incorporated into it. It's heavily influenced by Strong Towns. And we actually just found out a few weeks ago that it just won Texas APA's Comp Plan of the Year award. So we're pretty pumped about that and going to be accepting that award, I think, next week at the state planning conference. But a couple things that I wanted to highlight out of this plan that we did. One is the use of place types. Instead of the typical future land use plan, we went with these place types to kind of bridge that gap between land use and context. And it does set up the flexibility there for for defining your street types, your corridor types, the flexibility of housing and retail. One of the downsides or one of the tougher parts of implementing this is getting into the codes and how do you we got a question just the other day of, within let's say the traditional mixed use place type, it's got a mix of residential and commercial. We don't go in and define exactly where the commercial has to go, where the residential has to go. We're leaving that flexible, but that does put some pressure on staff when it comes to implementing it in terms of their codes and zoning requests and things of that nature. And Matt's going to touch on that here on San Marcos a little bit with what they did to kind of sync up their zoning and permitting process, so that they were looking at how to, instead of taking one development at a time, they were looking at multiple ones together and how you could piece those together to make that neighborhood stronger. The second part of Roy City that I want to talk about is we used a lot of these walking tours. Several of you guys have submitted questions about how do you engage different members in your community. Maybe it's the Latino community. Maybe it's in a typical suburban residential neighborhood that's got your 37-foot wide streets, and you're wanting to reduce, narrow that street down, but there's this concern about how to get two big Suburbans or trucks to pass each other while a car is parked, or whatever those kind of crazy things are that people talk about. We found you can get a lot done when you walk a street with the residents, and while you're walking it, you talk to them about these ideas of lane widths and the trail. And this picture here is one, Wood Street, the one up on the thick purple line on the top side. This was an area, it's right in the core of Roy City. The red, the different colors you see there, the dollar per acre stuff, but it's their oldest neighborhood in town. It's got a good traditional grid, a good mix of housing. It's just north of their downtown, and it's just south of one of the biggest city parks. As we were working on the comp plan, they were in the process of redesigning Wood Street to get reconstructed from a 20-foot wide street to a 37-foot wide residential street. And we were able to go in the process, take them on a walking tour like this, and we completely changed the design to keep it as a 20-foot wide street, and then add an 8-foot shared use path, bike walking path on one side that will make it more walkable to connect the park into the downtown. That there got translated into the engineering design, which was a funny backstory where I actually ended up being asked to sign and seal the typical section for the project because the city's engineer claimed their insurance wouldn't cover them if they designed a 20-foot wide street. But ultimately, it's now being built. It should be open in another 2 or 3 months. So that's going to be a really cool before and after picture. And then that then transferred into our firm Berdunity is now doing the design on Howard Street, which is the street on the south side, to do the same thing. So now the city's going to have a good bike walk connection from both neighborhoods, north and south of their downtown. Corsicana is next.
Sorry, I was on mute. I know we've got 15 minutes, so I'll make this quick. Corsicana is a really great example of a small community, 24,000, that has a strong arts community and a really great 2-story downtown that's, you know, a good 6-8 blocks long. But they had some great businesses downtown, and things just weren't sparking. Things really hadn't picked up. So they came to us saying, we want a pop-up program. And when I dug a little deeper, what I found out was what they were really wanting was more excitement and more momentum downtown, but also new tenants and new property owners. So what we decided to do was do this pop-up event for one weekend and focus on local entrepreneurs as well as regional entrepreneurs with different ideas that no one in town had ever seen before, and, you know, inspire people to do things a little bit differently, but then also incorporate you know, a fashion show and events at the theaters, and we had a magic show for kids, and, you know, things throughout the downtown that people could wander around and see everywhere the whole day, the whole weekend while they were there. And then we also included a property tour on Sunday afternoon so that people could start to be inside and really see those properties that are available for sale and for lease. We also provided some demographic stats for folks who are out of town who may be wondering what this market of Corsicana was like. So we really tried to feed that process as much as possible. Interestingly enough, in the 4 months that we were, you know, putting this one weekend event together, the interest that was drummed up around the downtown was what really ended up sparking the difference. And we saw 11 businesses either open or sign a lease within those 4 months. And it really, what it said to me was, once you start to engage people in a way that they can see where they can contribute, everyone in town started to think, this is my opportunity. Now's the time. Let's get in early. Let's do this. Things are finally going to take off. So it was a real sense of people coming together and paying attention to the little details. Maybe this will help galvanize, be the spark that takes off downtown. But then also, as we were bringing in these folks who were new to town and who were just learning about Corsicana, they were able to see the potential of this downtown in terms of the vision for this community. Corsicana was established in the 1800s, and, you know, as most downtowns, it has been pretty neglected for the last few decades. But there's a great, strong artist residency program that's attracting people from all over the world. And they know that, you know, now is their time to shine. So it's cool to bring people in and have everyone on board, from city staff to residents to business owners, property owners, be on board with what this vision is for the downtown. They don't have a town square, so we were big on public spaces. We engaged 4 local interns from the high school who were the National Honor Society, board members. So they had lots of friends and were really able to engage in things. So we had a dog park and a beer garden, and I'm going to send you guys a link right now to more information on that and a really great video on downtown if you're interested in that case study.
Okay, for San Marcos, Texas, I'll run through this really quickly because we want to get to questions. I arrived as the Assistant Director of Development Services in San Marcos in 2009, and the downtown looked like the photo above. These doors were closed down, wide streets, one-way streets, and 3 lanes each direction. And so I started realizing that through the codes that they made downtown illegal to build because of the parking requirements on-site stormwater management requirements, and over several other development aspects made it to where the buildings couldn't be reinvested in and meet the codes. So the first thing I did is I created a tax increment financing district over the district, rewrote the development codes to foster good development patterns, and we started seeing investments in downtown. The first year that we rewrote the code, $255 million got reinvested in downtown. In 2009, there were 84 people living downtown. Today, there are 3,700 people living downtown. There's 5,000 units under review. The assessed valuation of the district is 400% higher than the outlet malls. One of the questions I want to address real quick within this is the community wealth, and getting people to invest in seeing these investments as investment in the people that are existing. So the craft house there was opened by a local resident, and he had one other little restaurant there, but there was a substantial amount of reinvestment from the private side. And so a few years later, we came in and rebuilt the street and did underground electric, street trees every 30 feet. We took out a lane of traffic, put in reverse angle parking, a bike lane on one side, met all new ADA standards, tightened up the radiuses, pulled, and basically redid the street to foster, to show the private side that the public side would be matching it. The assessed valuation of the town went up $500 million within 1 year. This is a town of about 50,000 people. And so we saw real investment take place. And within the downtown area, you have a series of different business owners that make up that 400%. You see that little spike on the graph that says downtown. And that is the population investing into the heart of the community. And it was entrepreneurs that were willing to take a shot because the city was investing in it and they could see the potential for the town. And so now there's residents down there and outdoor cafes and markets, and it's just been a transformational change. But it was aligning the codes, the process, and capturing the dollars to reinvest back into the infrastructure was really critical as well. So.
And I just want to one thing that we didn't get a chance to hit on earlier is, when you think about the developer, when you think about the developer community, they're trying to mitigate their risk. And I heard somebody the other day say that incentives are one way that developers look to bridge that gap. Right? Is they have some investment they're willing to make, but they want to mitigate that risk, bridge that gap in some way. And if we can if we can shift our philosophy from, incentives bridging that gap to using these tactical approaches to explore, maybe it's a vacant building, maybe it's a vacant lot. If we can use the tactical stuff to explore what the community wants, that's another way that you can reduce and lower that risk and barrier to entry for a developer. So we still think there's value in like a market research or a market analysis study as some of this stuff to help you see some of those things. But there's a lot of value to using the tactical work to explore not just infrastructure design stuff like the width of a street or a bike lane, but also to explore your economic development to right there as you're doing it, you're providing these places for the community to come together. You're testing out different ideas, but at the same time, you're showing the development community what your community wants, and that's something that is really starting to emerge to us as well as not just saying placemaking is your economic development strategy, but using this tactical stuff to explore these different ideas to reduce that barrier to entry for developers. So just to wrap this up, and then Kia, we can go to questions. What we're rolling out here is the Frisco workshop that we have coming up on November 4th with Chuck and Monty Anderson is a one-day overview that we get into this stuff in a little more detail. What we're hearing is that there's so much there that one day might not be enough. So 2 days might be a little bit better, but we have these, what we're calling the intro overview workshops, where we can come anywhere, whether it's a region or a conference. And the idea there is to get people from multiple communities and backgrounds together to talk about and explore these ideas. If you're somebody, what we're hearing from the implementers is we want you to come into our town and talk about specific issues right here. To do that, we've got local launch workshops where this team, the four of us that you've heard here, will come into your community. We'll get these folks together in a room to talk engineering, to talk planning, to talk coding, finance, and we'll start these conversations. And then we look at what are specific issues and opportunities in your community, and then that rolls into our Cultivate community program that we're pushing this out, whether it's a comprehensive plan, a downtown plan, and it's this idea of we get some big stuff assessed right up front. We get the core team, community, all aspects of the community engaged. We get your big priorities, focus areas identified, and then we go straight into this tactical implementation of using tactical work to explore infrastructure changes, to explore building changes, and to explore economic development stuff. And then we feed that back into what we do with your plans and your codes and your processes. So that's it. I'm going to turn it back to you, Kia, to feed some questions to us.
All right. Thank you all so much for that fabulous, fabulous webcast. And it's a little chilly over here, but I had a lot of fun listening to you. So if the presenters would like to go ahead and turn their video back on so we can see your faces and you can see one another. We have some great questions coming in, both via Q&A and also via my email. A couple of people are having trouble with the Q&A function. So let's go ahead and start with one of the first questions we got, which is how can citizens push the city towards a better way of doing citizen engagement? Are there any examples of organizations assisting the city in determining how to spend money on and improve, say, a neighborhood park? This comes from Tim Wright.
Wow. I'm gonna, Amanda, you want to take that one from?
Yeah, actually, that first brought to mind when we started working in Corsicana, it was actually the historic preservation group that brought us to town. And I thought that was really interesting that their objective was saving these great old buildings. And the best way that we thought to do that was to, create the demand so that these property owners can get some tenants to help them fund those updates and things that needed to happen in those old buildings for them to thrive. So I would say, look at what the objective is, put your key team together with your staff. Definitely your elected official is key in this conversation, and your community organization, and start putting the pieces of that puzzle together. What's our primary objective? How small can we start? What can be our initial budget? Maybe you can do some crowdsourced fundraising to kick things off, but make sure you have the city's attention from the beginning. And so as things get rolling, they're keeping an eye on it, and be vocal and be on social media and make sure that your elected official knows that their constituents are clamoring for this.
I just want to add one thing. Find something authentic in the town, that people automatically recognize as that's our town, and start with something like that and grow off of that. That's a great way to get people engaged.
Great. If we're ready for another question, we have a two-parter from Catherine Trauger. The general question is, it seems to always be the same people who are involved in the city building process, whether it's the development code update or budgets or anything. What are the best practices for engaging a diverse group? And specifically, how do you engage Hispanic and Latino citizens?
I think I'll start with that one. I think the Wood Street one I touched on a minute ago of going as local as you can get, as deep down into the community, all the way down to the block level that you can get, finding a way to get those residents on that street or in that neighborhood together, and get, you may have to do multiple times to get, like Jordan was talking about earlier, of you have people that have different schedules, but get into their neighborhood, get them walking, and then use that as an opportunity to bounce back and forth between what are the issues that they see. Is it cars drive too fast, or is it we can't walk from here to there, or is it these buildings just are ugly, or it's I went to talk to my council member about this and they never called me back. It's crazy when you just walk and talk to somebody, the kind of things that you hear, but that can feed back. It's really powerful then to go back to the city staff or a council meeting and say, hey, we did this walking tour on this street, and they said this or said that, and everybody kind of leans in when it's when it's about the citizens and their voice. It's the tough part is you just have with the public meetings and the social media stuff, it's tough to kind of filter through the noise of getting everybody's input there, and not just the kind of the vocal minority. So something it didn't come across in this one, but Jordan here is fluent in Spanish as well. So being able to talk in everybody's, in the different languages, a lot of the graphics here, another way to communicate, ideas of, you have to find new ways to talk about these things that you can engage a broader audience.
Kevin, I want to add to that too, that sometimes you can go to these communities that you yourself are not a part of or familiar with and find the organizations and leadership groups that can help you plug into the community. Whether, it's churches, that's an easy one, but school groups, after school groups, community centers. Those can be some of the resources that you can tap into to help get in touch with those communities, or at least find the most vocal people in those communities who care passionately and will show up.
You know, that the kids, the students is a really good one. We've talked with, you know, if you can tap into the students, you tap into the parents. And one of the best ways to reach the suburban soccer mom that I call them, which my wife is one of those, but one of the best ways to reach them is to talk about their kids and say, hey, you know, Sally wants to be able to go from here to there, or, you know, you want your you know, just talk through them through their kids of the like the safety issue and the child the the car seats. If you can talk with, just find the issue for different people and communicate it to them, that way they get much more interested in street design or building design, whatever it is, if you can put it through, you know, through their lens. But the kids and the schools are and the churches, as Amanda said, those are great ways to really tap into to people. That's where you find the people that really care about the community.
Thanks so much. We're at time, but I think we should go ahead and answer just a couple of more if you guys have the time to stay for 5 more minutes. I have one via email from Alice Tibbetts, who is writing in from Silver Bay, Minnesota. Silver Bay has an excellent comp plan, which was completed last year. They're a small city of 1,800, and they want their agenda to be to execute the plan based on stormwater principles. Her question is an unusual one. What leeway does a city have to not execute a plan, and how can average citizens hold their feet to the fire to follow the plan that they set?
I can jump on this one. Oftentimes plans are written in such broad manners, it's hard to actually hold anything accountable. And I find this in a lot of cities that, and I mean, I'm going to say this, a lot of cities write policies that allow accountability to not occur, you know, and there's a real issue with that. Create a metrics for the comp plan. That's the fastest way to make it implementable. Come up with a system of metrics of where it's going to be applied geographically, and a checks and balance system that you can quantify your implementation plan off of, if you will. And if I heard correctly, it wanted to be based off of stormwater management as a principle. Stormwater, any land use decision that you're making in any development impacts your stormwater management, and stormwater is a critical element when doing planning, and oftentimes it's not looked at regionally enough, and small area flooding becomes a issue in the urban core. Undersized infrastructure, there's several reasons why, but incremental development needs to be thought through when addressing that. Sounds like you're in a small town, so hopefully you have adequate time to address regional stormwater early on. So I think that, you know, geographically, and then make sure that you create a metrics that can link back to your comp plan goals.
And I would just add to that the matrix, and then some of the more successful ones that I've seen is if you can take you know, some of the policies or objective statements from the comp plan and integrate those through the city in everything that you're doing. So if it's an agenda item on a council meeting, it ties back to one of those goals or implement, you know, action items. If it's a monthly newsletter that a city sends out, maybe with each of those newsletters, you have a something that gives an update on progress on the comprehensive plan. Some cities will fight that a little bit because they know it holds their feet to the fire. But if it's your comp plan advisory committee, your citizen committee, some of those implementers that can kind of push this and say, look, we care, we're going to be here long term, we want to invest in our community. This is a way that you can kind of give back and you know, keep us updated on progress. You can usually get that done, and then again syncing up the daily activities of the staff with the council meeting reports, with development review reports, and then the communication back with the community overall. Communication is a real big piece of this.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I have two questions that I'm going to kind of link a little bit about how specific population groups can start to implement these ideas. One comes from Doug Harris, who is a real estate agent, and wondered if any of you had experience working with agents or brokers. He feels like they're a huge supporter of the status quo, and strong tendency ideas are like asking them to search for extraterrestrial life, to quote him. Another one is from Christine Terrell, who asked about local business owners. How can local businesses shift the narratives of dead economic development models and get them in alignment with the Cultivate approach and with the Strong Towns message?
There, I'm unmuted. I wanted to start by addressing Doug's question. I saw that roll in a second ago and laughed because I do know a lot of brokers. And in fact, when I was working for this developer recently, they had this elaborate plan for an amazing development that they wanted to be all tenanted by local entrepreneurs. And they quickly realized that it's hard to get bank financing if you don't have those credit-worthy tenants. So that's another discussion in itself, but it was hard for us to find the brokers that had those kinds of relationships with local entrepreneurs. So that's really a niche that you could cultivate yourself and, you know, carve out a name for your firm, even if it's not your company. Being known for that, it's a really hard skill to come by in the brokerage world. So I would say just take the bull by the horns and, you know, do it yourself. But being the person who can connect the space owners to the entrepreneurs is so key in that puzzle.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest piece of Monty Anderson's work that I really, really like. Is not only is he doing the small developer stuff of incremental development, but he's that connector in his communities, or what he calls his farms. He's finding those buildings or those places. He's finding the entrepreneur that wants to open the business. You know, and then he's working with the local bank, and he's making those deals happen. So I would absolutely agree with Amanda. I think there's a market for these kind of people, that it's not going to be your typical approach of just flipping, you know, just selling land or selling or property, but it's more that connector within the community of somebody that wants to start a business. This idea of business on the first floor, leasing out or living in the space up above it. Someone, you know, in a lot of these communities, somebody that can communicate that and connect those dots. I think it's a huge opportunity and a need. Matt, do you want to cover the second half of that about the San Marcos part?
Well, I wanted to add really quick that I think an important way to make a downtown or, you know, a walkable district unique from the status quo is to focus on the place, because people want that kind of experience where they can have time to linger. And we have a really popular one in Dallas called Bishop Arts, where people have heard about this and it's such an amazing place, and they come to see it and it's like 3 blocks long, at least it was for a long time. And people were disappointed because they craved that experience, not only to, you know, shop and eat, which we can do anywhere, but to wander around, see pretty architecture. So by building more placemaking into your district, your shopping center, and promoting that as the number one thing about, you know, come spend all day here, come wander around, you'll find interesting things, you'll stumble on fun, you'll be surprised that you can spend 8 hours down here and you've, you know, wasted the whole day with the entire family, and we all had a good time, and even grandma had somewhere to sit, and, you know, we had somewhere to change the baby, and, you know, make it a complete experience, because that is something that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah. I'm going to try and address several of the questions still pending in this one answer. So, you know, this is all about relationships. Communities are being built based off of relationships, and, you know, council decisions. These are all human aspects to building out our environment. And it's a series of negotiations, a series of trade-offs of how this all works. I think it's extremely important to find the place in the community where the smallest change can make the biggest difference. Like, start there and host a meeting about what you're trying to accomplish, and see if you could gather the community members up, you know, drum up the excitement, you know what I mean, about what you're trying to take on, and how you're, and with a clearly defined path of who you want to be involved. And that can help shift the brokers, get the development community on board, as well as, I mean, talking to the fire chief. Someone asked earlier about lane dimensions, and the road that we showed in San Marcos is a 10.5-foot lane. And we had a long conversation with the fire chief. It was a negotiation. We went back and forth on allowing that lane width. my solution that I came up with was we are going to do the bike lane on that same side that the 10.5-foot lane is. So you have an effective lane width. If the fire truck is driving down the street, a bicyclist is going to be knowledgeable enough to get out of the way. And so they had an effective street width of 16 feet, if you will, or greater, so that we're able to do that. Anyhow, there's a series of negotiations, and so really think through how everything fits together and put the pieces together. Find one thing you would like to accomplish, build that team, and go for it. I think that's the best way to do it. I hope that answered that question and a few others that were.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you all so much from Cultivate Collaborative for giving us a little teaser of your introduction to, or your Cultivating Strong Towns workshop. And we'll be reaching out with more resources. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. And thank you all for joining us. Keep doing what you can to build strong towns. Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
so much for having us.
Bye.
Bye.